Welcome to the Guitar Show. We're going to be talking about Dumbelators. Now, many of you have a Dumble style amplifier, such as a Dumbleator. You might have a Mystic Blues, you might have a 2-rock, you might have a Queen amp, you might have a red plate, a Seriatone. There's lots of different clones coming out more and more each year. Now, some of these amplifiers have what's called a buffered effects loop built into the back of the amp. It's normally at the back. But if you really want the true Dumble style, as Howard Alexander built them, then the amp won't have an effects loop. Will have an effects loop, but it won't be buffered. Okay, so it will be called passive. Therefore, the reason for that, actually, my understanding is that Dumble didn't want to have any active electronics in there affecting the tone. He just felt that it was a more pure circuit without the effects loop. So then he designed this thing here, which guitar players such as Larry Carlton and Robbrn Ford used because they were using a lot of effects, especially in the 80s. Everybody had racks, rack, 2290 TC electronic delays. They had Lexicon reverbs. So it was all the kind of rage back in those days. So Dumble created this thing, okay, which is called a Dumbleator, and it basically acted as a buffered effects loop. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. This particular one here is made by a gentleman called Tommy Cougar, who resides in Sweden, and he's the maker of the Mystic Blues amps, and this is his version of it. It's basically a clone of Dumble's Dumbleator, and it's got the same controls and same features, so I can use this to demonstrate what it does. So basically, on the front here, you've got a send and a return knob, and this is a mono version. And then you've got some bright switches, and you've got a standby switch and a power on and off. You've got a LED there, and on the back you've got 4 1/4-inch jacks. And what these are is the amplifier in, amplifier out, and then you've got your effects return and send. Okay, so just to sum up, just to describe this, really what it's actually for, it's an all-tube impedance matching device that allows you to use your Dumble style amplifier without problems interfacing effects. The way it does that is it takes the signal from the preamp out of the amplifier and changes the impedance to a proper level to drive your racks or your effects pedals, and then it brings the level from your effects back up to match the power amp in on the amplifier. Okay, so the Dumbleator, that's its main function in a Dumble amp. Now I'm going to tell you the reason why I have it. There's 2 extra reasons why I have this. Along with the buffered effects loop, which you all know because a lot of amps have them. What else it does? It adds an extra tube. So there's 12 AX7 in here. And what this does is it smooths out the sound of the Dumble style amp. My amps in particular work much better. I have 2 Mystic Blues amps, and they work really beautifully with this in the circuit. Okay, so I've got another one here. This is a Dumbleator loopulator, and it's basically the same thing. Okay, just two of the same. So the way what it does is it smooths the amp. So if you've got an amp that's kind of sometimes a little bit harsh on the ears. Now I like 2 types of speakers for my Dumble style amp. I like Celestians because they're softer. Okay, it's just nice soft sound. But I also like the American speakers, such as the Ultic Lansing and the JBLs and the EVs. The problem with the American speakers, they're very full and beautifully nice. You get this crystal chimes, which you don't get with the Celestians, but you get this beautiful crystal chimes, but they can be a little bit harsh. So this particularly works well, in my opinion, with those big American, big high-powered speakers. It just smooths everything out. Everything becomes beautiful and smooth, and it's not harsh on the ear. And so that's why I like it. It's that extra gain, that extra tube that's going through it, just really nice. So that's one reason I like it. Now the other reason, which is actually a more important reason, is I actually use this as kind of like an attenuator. I don't know if that's the right word. But I use it as an attenuator. So what I basically do is I have this connected in without any effects, and I'll set it to unity. So I'll turn these knobs here, I'll turn any bright switches off, because I don't tend to use the bright. I'll tell you what these do in a minute. But I just set it to unity gain, so I'm controlling the volume on the master on my Dumble style amp. So I'm writing that volume, I'm finding the sweet spot. On my particular amps, it's around about 2 o'clock, you know, so it's quite high up, pretty high. I'd never be able to have that at that level at a concert, you know, a normal gig even, because that's pretty loud on a 100-watt Dumble style amp. You know, even Robbrn Ford probably only gets his up to maybe 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. You know, Larry's is even less, so Larry Carlton's. So mine's really high up, but it really is cooking, you know, the power amp section is cooking, you know. So then what I do is then I can bring this, I think it's this one here, I bring this one down, right down, I literally bring it down to 0, and then I can have it on next to nothing, and you know, it kind of like, it sounds really thin, and then all of a sudden it kicks in, and you've got the full sound of the amplifier, you know, in the sweet spot, and you can just ride it on this, and you can get it down to literally room level. So when I'm recording a lot of clips, that's how I'm getting a nice, not so loud volume. But of course I can take it right up here and get it, you know, probably concert level would be here, which is 10 o'clock, maybe 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. That would be concert, normal club or theatre, small theatre. And so the beauty of this thing is it kind of does 2 extra things. It's smoothing the amplifier out, and it's also acting as an attenuator. So that means that you can have your amplifier full blast, you know, cooking the power amp section, and that really does work for me. So really I can't play my Dumble style amps without a Dumbleator now. Now they have a different sound. So this one here sounds different to this one. So this one, like I said, this was made by Tommy Cougar from Sweden, who makes the custom by Cougar amps, and which I have 2 of. And this one here on top, the silver one, is actually made by a gentleman by the name of Brandon Montgomery, if I'm not mistaken. And this is called a Bluetone. And they both sound completely different. The circuit's the same, maybe different components. I know this top one's got orange drops in it, but they really do sound different. So this one particularly works well with an amplifier I have called Sally. And this one, the bottom one, works really well with my black amp, which is the Robbrn Ford. It's voiced for a Robbrn Ford sound. So I don't know why that is, why one should work better with the other, but they do have a different sound. So I mean, that they really do impart a big sound onto your Dumble style amp. And there are times when I do use the amp, it's just an amp, and I don't even bother using one of these. But in that sort of scenario, it's normally when I'm doing a wet and dry rig, or you know, I'm just using it as a slave amp and I have another amp. So if I really want that tone, if I want to be in the zone with that D style tone, you know, the really killing tone, I'm going to use one of these things. I couldn't achieve that sound without one of these. Now, interestingly, Robbrn Ford. I'm going to tell you about Robbrn Ford and why I like him. Well, I love his playing. I mean, I'm a huge Robbrn Ford fan, but I like his playing up to a certain point. Not his playing, I mean his tone. His tone was really killing. It was beautiful up till about 2007. My favourite era, my favourite year, there's a YouTube video you want to check out. 2001 in Paris, New Morning. 2001, and he had his rig dialed in, it was to perfection. Especially when he was playing the Telecaster, the overdrive tone was absolutely beautiful. So his setup then was, you know, his Dumble amplifier, one of these TC2290, and that was basically his core rig to get that tone. Then I think around 2007 he stopped using the Dumbleator. Okay, he stopped using it. This actually coincided with his techs, because I noticed that when he went from his original tech to David, who was a tech around late 90s, early 2000s, he dropped all his sort of big rack and he went down to a more simplified version of just a 2290 and a Dumbleator, which was a good thing, and I think, in my opinion, and that's where he really was in the zone, and a beautiful sound, and he was using his overdrive on his amp. Okay, then when he ditched the Dumbleator, he stopped using the overdrive on his amp. So when he plays live now, he's only using the overdrive. The way he's getting his overdrive is from a pedal. He's no longer using the overdrive station on the amplifier. because he doesn't take one of these things here around with him, you know, which is a real shame for me, because that it was so synonymous with Robbrn Ford, that overdrive tone. It was kind of a marriage made in heaven, and I do really miss that side of his playing. You know, I mean, he's got it in the fingers. He doesn't need a D-style amp. You can play a Fender. You can play, you know, a Harmony K guitar and still sound $1 million. But you know, for me, the pinnacle of his tone was around 2001. He was using the Dumbleator, the 2290. It was a beautiful thing to behold. Nowadays he's not using one of these. That means he can't use the overdrive, because if he's using effects, which he does like, he likes his slapback delay and he likes a bit of reverb, he's going to need to go through the front end, and so the overdrive has to go before that. So he needs to use a pedal. He can no longer use, you know, he can no longer distort the preamp, because the reverb's on the wrong side of the preamp, if you see what I mean, you know. So that's kind of how his tone has evolved. And that's the reason why I will still use a Dumbleator, and I never use an amp, an ODS style amp, without a Dumbleator. You know, because for me it's the system, it's what works. It's fantastic. So I hope that's a video that, you know, clears up a few things how I use this. Like I said, apologies if I don't go into specifics about how this thing is made. There is a video on YouTube where the guy's taken apart a loopulator, the Blue Turn 1. And he's telling you the circuit, so you can kind of Google that. But if you just want to hear a layman's version of why I use these things, this is it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe. We're going to be back soon with plenty of more stuff on Dumbles. Okay, so speak soon. All the best. Take care.